She stole my life, but she never saw me coming. Revenge reborn. Some betrayals break your heart. Others rebuild your soul. On the day my husband introduced his new wife, I was still his legal wife. That wasn't even the worst part. The woman standing beside him in a white dress wasn't a stranger. She was my best friend. The same woman who had held my hand when I cried. The same woman who promised she would always protect me. The same woman who smiled at me while secretly stealing everything I loved. The guests clapped. My family stayed silent. And I stood outside the wedding hall in the pouring rain, watching my entire life disappear. If someone had told me that one day those same people would beg me for forgiveness, I would have laughed through my tears. Because at that moment, I had nothing. No husband, no family, no home, no future, only pain. My name is Emma. 5 years ago, I believed I had the perfect life. I met Daniel when I was 24. He wasn't rich. He wasn't famous. He was simply kind, or at least, that's what I believed. We built our dreams together. Every paycheck went into our little apartment. Every weekend was spent planning a future we couldn't wait to live. When Daniel lost his job, I worked double shifts to keep us afloat. When he wanted to start his own business, I emptied my savings without hesitation. One day, he would whisper, "I'll make you proud." I believed every word. Then my best friend Olivia came back into my life. We had known each other since college. She was funny, confident, the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. When she called me after years apart, I felt lucky. "I've missed you," she said. I believed that too. Soon she became part of our everyday life. Dinner together, weekend trips, birthday celebrations, movie nights. She wasn't just my best friend anymore. She was family. Or so I thought. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. The secret smiles. The sudden silence whenever I entered a room. The late-night messages Daniel quickly deleted. The excuses that never made sense. But love has a strange way of blinding people. When you trust someone completely, you stop questioning them. And that's exactly what they counted on. One evening, I came home early from work. The house was unusually quiet. Daniel's shoes were by the door. So were Olivia's. I smiled. I thought maybe they were planning a surprise birthday party. Instead, I opened the bedroom door. And my world stopped. No shouting, no dramatic music, no screaming, just silence. The kind of silence that changes a person's life forever. Daniel looked at me. Olivia looked at me. Neither of them said a single word. I quietly closed the door, picked up my car keys, and drove away. That night something inside me died. But something else had just been born. And neither of them realized it yet. I stopped crying and started planning. I didn't go back home that night. I drove for hours without knowing where I was going. The rain kept hitting the windshield, but I barely noticed. Every few minutes the same picture flashed through my mind. Danvia, my bedroom, my life. I pulled into a small roadside motel just before sunrise. The room smelled old, the bed was uncomfortable, and the lights flickered. But for the first time in years it was quiet. No lies, no fake smiles, no pretending. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. When the sun finally rose, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my hands were shaking. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Then my phone rang. It was Daniel. I let it ring, again and again. Then came Olivia's message. "Emma, please let us explain." Explain what? How long they had been lying. How many times they laughed behind my back. How many memories they had stolen from me. I deleted the message without replying. An hour later, my mother called. For one brief second, I thought she was calling to comfort me. I answered. Instead, she said something I'll never forget. "Emma, maybe it's better if you just let Daniel go. Fighting won't change anything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, he cheated on me." There was a long silence. Then she quietly replied, "People make mistakes. For months, maybe years." I ended the call without another word. That was the moment I realized something painful. I hadn't just lost my husband. I had lost everyone who was willing to accept his lies. The next morning I returned to the apartment. I packed only one suitcase. I didn't argue, I didn't scream, I didn't ask for answers. Daniel stood in the living room watching me. "You deserve an explanation," he finally said. I zipped my suitcase. "No." He looked confused. "I deserve honesty." For the first time he had nothing to say. As I walked toward the front door, Olivia stepped inside. She looked nervous. "I never wanted to hurt you." I smiled. Not because I believed her, because I finally understood who she really was. "You didn't steal my life," I said calmly. "You only stole the version of it that was built on lies." And neither of them expected that answer. I walked away without looking back. Outside, I opened my bank account on my phone. The balance made my heart sink. Almost everything was gone. Daniel had convinced me months earlier to move our savings into his business account. A business that never really existed. He hadn't just broken my heart, he had emptied my future. For the next few weeks I slept wherever I could, cheap motels, a tiny rented room, sometimes inside my car. I worked every job I could find. Morning shifts, night shifts, weekend shifts. There were days I survived on instant noodles and coffee. Every night before sleeping, I asked myself the same question. Why? But eventually, that question changed. Not, why did they betray me? Instead, what am I going to become because of this? That single question changed everything. I stopped checking Daniel's social media. I stopped asking mutual friends about him. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. Instead, I enrolled in evening business classes. I learned about investing, marketing, leadership, negotiation. While they were busy enjoying the life they had stolen, I was quietly building one they could never imagine. Months turned into years. The frightened woman who had walked out with one suitcase slowly disappeared. A stronger woman took her place. One afternoon, my mentor looked at me after a meeting. You know what's different about you? I smiled. What? You don't chase revenge. You chase excellence. His words stayed with me. Because he was right. Real revenge isn't destroying someone else's future. It's creating a future they can never take from you. 3 years later, I was no longer struggling to survive. I owned part of a growing company. People respected my opinions. I spoke at business events. For the first time in my life I felt truly free. Then, on a quiet Friday morning an email arrived. The sender's name made my heart stop. Daniel Carter. The subject line contained only 4 words. Please, I need help. I stared at the screen. The man who once threw me away was asking me to save him. I slowly smiled, not because I hated him, because destiny had finally opened the door I had been waiting for. I clicked open. I stared at Daniel's email for nearly 5 minutes. 3 years, 3 long years without a single apology, without a single message asking how I was. And now, he needed my help. I clicked the email. It was surprisingly short. Emma, I know I don't deserve your time. But if there's even a small part of you that remembers who I used to be, please meet me. I have no one else. Daniel, I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I believed him. Because I wanted to understand what could make a man like Daniel admit he had no one left. I closed my laptop. For a moment, I considered deleting the email. But something inside me whispered, go, not for him, for yourself. The cafe was only 20 minutes away. I arrived early and chose a table near the window. Outside, people laughed as they hurried through the streets. Life had moved on, so had I. Exactly at 2 o'clock. Daniel walked in. I barely recognized him. The expensive suits were gone. His confident smile had disappeared. His hair was messy. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. The man who once thought he had everything now looked like someone carrying the weight of the world. He spotted me. For a second, he hesitated. Then he slowly walked over. I nodded politely. Sit. For almost a minute, neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked down and whispered, I'm sorry. 3 years ago, I had dreamed about hearing those words. Now, they meant almost nothing. What happened? I asked calmly. Daniel let out a long breath. The business failed. I wasn't surprised. Money. I trusted the wrong people. I lost everything. He paused before adding, and Olivia left. There it was. The perfect ending to the perfect love story they had chosen over me. When? I asked. A year ago. I simply nodded. He looked disappointed. Aren't you going to say anything? What would you like me to say? He lowered his eyes. I deserve that. For the first time in our conversation, I saw genuine regret, not because he lost me, because he had finally experienced what betrayal felt like. We talked for almost an hour. He admitted things I had never known. The affair had lasted almost 8 months. Several mutual friends had known. Even some members of my family had suspected it. No one told me. Everyone chose silence. Because silence was easier than truth. Oddly enough, hearing the full story didn't make me angry. It made me feel free. The questions that had haunted me for years finally disappeared. There was nothing left to wonder. Only lessons left to learn. As we stood to leave, Daniel quietly asked, do you think you'll ever forgive me? I looked directly into his eyes. Hope appeared on his face. Then I finished my sentence. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild trust. His smile faded. And it doesn't give people a second chance to hurt you. I walked toward the exit. Emma. I stopped. Without turning around, I asked, yes. I really did love you. I smiled sadly. Maybe you did, but love without loyalty is just another beautiful lie. Then I walked away. That evening, I thought the chapter was finally over. I was wrong. The next morning, my assistant knocked on my office door. There's someone here asking to see you. Who is it? She looked uncomfortable. You know her. A strange feeling settled in my chest. Who? She took a slow breath. Olivia, the woman who had stolen my husband, was now standing in my office reception, and judging by the tears in her eyes, she wasn't there to celebrate. She was there because she had lost something too. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked toward the reception area. For the first time in 3 years, the three of us were about to face the truth. And this time, no one would be able to hide behind lies. Olivia stood in the reception area, twisting her hands nervously. The confident woman I remembered was gone. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by something plain. Her eyes were red. She looked exhausted. When she saw me, she stood up immediately. Emma. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply said, you have 5 minutes. She nodded. I don't need more than that. I led her into a private meeting room. The door closed behind us. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Olivia whispered, I deserve your hate. I looked at her calmly. Hate takes too much energy. She lowered her eyes. I know. There was a silence so heavy it almost hurt. Then she reached into her bag and placed a thick brown envelope on the table. Proof. I frowned. Proof of what? She pushed the envelope toward me. The truth. Inside were dozens of papers. Bank statements, emails, business contracts, property records. At first, none of it made sense. Then, I noticed one familiar signature, Daniel's, another page, another signature, then another. But there was one name that appeared on almost every document. Richard Carter, Daniel's father. I looked up. What is this? Olivia took a deep breath. Everything started with him. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She looked me straight in the eyes. Daniel didn't plan everything. His father did. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Richard Carter had always treated me kindly. He called me daughter. He never missed my birthday. He always encouraged Daniel to work harder. Or so I thought. Olivia continued. When Daniel's business failed years ago, your savings were the only money available. I stayed silent. Richard convinced Daniel that you were too trusting. He told him to move the money into another account. He said you'd never question it. Every word felt heavier than the last. He also wanted Daniel to marry someone from a wealthy family. I stared at her. You. She nodded slowly. My parents owned several companies. It was never about love. It was about money. Suddenly, everything made sense. The affair, the lies, the rushed wedding. None of it had happened by accident. Someone had been pulling the strings from the beginning. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. Because I finally know how it feels. She looked down at her wedding ring. I wasn't special. I was useful. When my family's money disappeared after my father's company collapsed, Richard turned against me. Daniel changed too. The same people who once welcomed me suddenly acted like I never belonged. I remembered something my grandmother used to say. People who betray others eventually teach betrayal to everyone around them. Olivia wiped away a tear. I lost everything. My family. My friends. And now. She looked at me with regret. I finally understand what I did to you. I closed the envelope. For years, I had imagined this moment. The woman who helped destroy my life, now asking for nothing except the chance to tell the truth. But something didn't feel right. There was still one question. If all this is true, why didn't you tell me before? She closed her eyes. Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing the life I thought I had won. And by the time I realized the truth, it was too late. I believed her, not because she deserved my trust, because regret has a sound. And hers was real. As Olivia stood to leave, she hesitated. There's one more thing. I looked up. What? She reached into her purse again. This time, she handed me a small silver key. What does this open? Richard's private office. He doesn't know I still have it. I looked at the key in my hand. Cold, heavy, mysterious. There's something inside that office. What? She slowly shook her head. And don't know. But every time Richard talked about you, he locked himself in there first. That night, I couldn't sleep. The envelope lay open across my dining table. Every document pointed to one conclusion. I hadn't been betrayed by two people. I had been caught inside a carefully planned game. But there was still one missing piece. What was Richard hiding? The next evening, after everyone had left the building, I drove to Richard Carter's old office. The security guard recognized me immediately. "Good evening, Ms. Emma." I smiled politely. "I just need to collect something." He opened the gate without asking another question. My heart pounded as I walked down the silent hallway. The silver key felt heavier with every step. Room 214. Richard Carter, the name was still on the door. I inserted the key, it clicked. The door slowly opened. The office was dark. Dust covered the furniture. Nothing seemed unusual. Until I noticed a painting hanging slightly crooked on the wall. Something about it felt strange. I moved it aside. Behind the painting was a hidden safe, and taped to the front of it was a single handwritten note. It read, "If Emma ever finds this, everything is over." My hands froze. I looked at the safe, then back at the note. Whatever was inside had the power to destroy everything Richard Carter had spent years protecting. I took a deep breath and reached for the lock. My fingers trembled as I reached for the lock. The safe wasn't electronic. It needed a key. I looked at the small silver key Olivia had given me. For a moment, I wondered if this was a trap, if Richard somehow knew I would come. But curiosity was stronger than fear. I slid the key into the lock. Click. The heavy metal door slowly opened. There was no cash, no jewelry, no expensive documents. Only three things: a thick black folder, a small flash drive, and an old photograph. I picked up the photograph first. The moment I looked at it, my heart stopped. It was a picture of me, taken nearly 10 years ago. I was standing beside Daniel. Both of us were smiling, but someone else was in the background. Richard, watching us, watching me. On the back of the photo were 5 handwritten words. "She still doesn't know." A cold chill ran through my body. No. What? I opened the black folder. The first few pages were ordinary business papers. Then everything changed. Every page carried my name, Emma Wilson, employment records, bank details, copies of my identification, private notes about my daily routine, addresses where I had lived, even medical appointment dates. Someone had been watching me, long before Daniel betrayed me. I turned another page. My hands began shaking. Across the top in bold letters were the words "Personal Evalu." Below it, Richard had written, "Emma is loyal, hardworking, and extremely trusting. She will never suspect Daniel if the plan is executed slowly." I couldn't breathe. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't family. I had become a project. Tears filled my eyes, not because of what I had lost, because I finally understood something terrifying. None of it had been spontaneous. Every lie, every smile, every fake promise. Someone had been studying me for years. I kept reading. There were monthly updates. Trust level remains high. No signs of suspicion. Continue encouraging joint financial decisions. Each sentence felt colder than the last. Then I reached the final page. There was only one line. "Proceed after the wedding anniversary." That was the week everything fell apart. I slowly picked up the flash drive. Fortunately, there was an old desktop computer still sitting on Richard's desk. I plugged it in. After a few long seconds, one video file appeared. No title, no date. I clicked play. The screen flickered. Then Richard appeared. He was sitting in the very same office. He looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this, it means my plan has failed." My heartbeat echoed through the silent room. Richard continued, "People will call me a monster, but they'll never understand. I did what I believed was necessary." He leaned forward. "Daniel was never strong enough to build success on his own. So I found someone who could." I frowned. "You." He wasn't speaking to the camera anymore. He was speaking about me. Emma had everything Daniel needed: discipline, integrity, patience. So I encouraged their relationship. I felt sick. Richard smiled. "The funny thing about good people, they're predictable. They trust. They forgive. And they rarely ask the right questions." I wanted to turn the video off, but I couldn't. There was only one problem. Richard continued, "Daniel fell in love. Real love. And real love makes people weak." I stared at the screen. "What?" Richard sighed. I told him emotions would ruin everything. But he refused to listen. Then Richard said something I never expected. So I created a reason for him to walk away. My blood ran cold. "What reason?" I whispered, as if he could hear me. Richard answered. "I introduced Olivia." The room fell silent. He admitted it. He had planned everything. The affair, the manipulation, the betrayal. Not because Daniel wanted another woman, but because Richard wanted control. The video ended with one final sentence. "If Emma ever discovers the truth, she deserves the company." The screen went black. I blinked. Did I hear that correctly? The company. I searched the folder again. Hidden beneath the last document was a sealed envelope. Across the front, Richard had written my name. I carefully opened it. Inside was a signed legal document. My eyes widened. According to the papers, Richard had secretly transferred 51% ownership of Carter Holdings into my name months before his disappearance. It couldn't be real. Why would the man who destroyed my life leave me control of everything he had built? Before I could think any further, my phone rang. It was my assistant. Her voice was shaking. You need to come to the office. Right now. What happened? She hesitated, then whispered. Daniel is here, and he's not alone. Richard Carter just walked through the front door. My heart stopped. That's impossible. Everyone believed Richard had disappeared months ago. Some even thought he was dead. But according to my assistant, he had just returned, and this time, he was asking to see me. I drove to my office faster than I ever had before. One question kept repeating in my mind. How could Richard Carter be alive? For months, no one had seen him. His phone had been disconnected. His house was empty. Even Daniel believed his father had vanished without a trace. Yet now, he was sitting inside my office, waiting for me. When I stepped into the lobby, every employee fell silent. No one spoke. No one moved. My assistant slowly walked toward me. They're in the conference room. I nodded. My heartbeat echoed with every step. The conference room door was slightly open. I pushed it. Inside sat two men, Daniel and Richard Carter. Richard looked older than I remembered. His hair had turned almost completely gray. The confident businessman was gone. In his place sat a tired old man with deep lines across his face. He looked at me, then quietly stood. For years, I had imagined confronting him. I thought I would scream, demand answers, make him regret everything. Instead, I simply asked one question. Why? Richard closed his eyes. For a long moment. He said nullly, he answered. Because I was afraid. I almost laughed. Afraid. The man who manipulated my marriage was afraid. He nodded. You deserve the truth. I folded my arms. I'm listening. He looked toward Daniel. I built Carter Holdings from nothing. I spent 40 years creating an empire. I believed wealth was the only thing that mattered. Daniel lowered his head. Richard continued. When Daniel was young, I protected him from every failure. I solved every problem. I gave him everything. Except character. A silence filled the room. I realized too late. I had raised a son who depended on everyone else. He looked directly at me. Then you came into his life. You challenged him. You inspired him. You made him work harder. For the first time, I believed he could become the leader I wanted. Richard paused. But then I made the biggest mistake of my life. I stopped trusting love. I trusted control instead. His voice began shaking. I convinced myself that if Daniel depended on you too much, he would never become strong. So I pushed him away from you. Daniel whispered. Dad, but stop. Richard ignored him. I introduced Olivia. I manipulated business deals. I lied. I interfered. I destroyed the only relationship that could have saved my son. Daniel covered his face with his hands. Tears slipped through his fingers. I listened to him. Daniel admitted. I could have said no, but I didn't. I chose the easy path. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. And I've regretted it every day since. I stood there in complete silence. For years, I believed Daniel had been the mastermind. Now I understood something different. Richard had created the storm. Daniel had chosen to stay inside it. Neither of them was innocent. Richard slowly reached into his briefcase. He removed a familiar document. The same ownership papers I had found inside the safe. They're real, he said. I transferred control of Carter Holdings to you. I stared at him. Because you earned it. I shook my head. No, I earned my own company. I don't want yours. Richard smiled sadly. I knew you'd say that. He slid another document across the table. This isn't a gift. It's an apology. I opened the file. Inside was a complete financial report. Over the past 3 years, Richard had quietly sold nearly all of his personal assets. Every dollar taken from me. Every investment Daniel had stolen. Every financial loss connected to their betrayal had been repaid, with interest. The final page showed the total. It was more money than I had ever imagined. I slowly looked up. You repaid everything. Richard nodded. It will never erase what I did. But I couldn't leave this world carrying that debt. His words caught my attention. Leave this world. Richard gave a tired smile. The doctors found my illness too late. I don't have much time. The room fell completely silent. Daniel stared at his father in shock. You never told me. I wanted my final decision to be fixing what I broke. Richard slowly stood. Then, to Daniel's complete surprise, he turned toward me and bowed his head, not as a businessman, not as a father, but as a man asking forgiveness. I'm sorry, Emma. I destroyed years of your life. I cannot ask you to forgive me. I only ask that you live the life I tried to take from you. For several seconds, no one spoke. Finally, I walked closer. Richard never looked up. I gently placed the ownership papers back into his hands. I forgive you. His shoulders began to shake. But forgiveness doesn't mean I want your company. I already built my own future. A tear rolled down Richard's face. For the first time in decades, the man who controlled everyone had no control at all. As Richard prepared to leave, he stopped at the door. Without turning around, he said one final sentence. There's one last truth. The person who anonymously invested in your first company 3 years ago was never me. I frowned. What? Richard slowly looked back. I wanted to help, but someone else got there first. My heart skipped a beat. If it wasn't you, then who was it? Richard smiled. You'll find out soon. Then he walked away, leaving me with one final mystery. Who had secretly believed in me when I had nothing, and why had they remained hidden all these years? Richard's final words refused to leave my mind. Someone else invested in your company. Someone believed in you before anyone else did. Who? For 3 years, I had assumed my success came from nothing but hard work. Now I was learning, someone had quietly opened the first door and never asked for credit. The next morning, I called my company's chief financial officer. Can you pull every record from our first round of funding? He looked confused. Wes, from 3 transaction, every investor, no matter how small. 2 hours later, a thick report landed on my desk. Most of the names were familiar. Friends, small business investors. Then I noticed one entry. Investor ID A17, no name, no address, no company, just a wire transfer. Exactly $250,000. Without that investment, my company would have closed before it ever opened. Who is A17? I asked. The CFO frowned. We've never known. The money came through a private trust. What trust? He turned another page. The Phoenix Trust. I had never heard of it. Can you trace it? He slowly shook his head. It was designed to protect anonymous donors. I leaned back in my chair. Someone had hidden their identity on purpose. Not because they wanted attention, but because they wanted me to succeed without ever knowing who helped me. That evening, I drove home in silence. As I unlocked my apartment door, I noticed something unusual. A small envelope lay on the floor. There was no stamp, no return address, only one word written across the front, Emma. My heart raced. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me standing outside my very first office, the day I signed the lease. I remembered that day perfectly. I had been terrified, completely alone. Or so I thought. Someone had been there, watching. The back of the photograph contained another message. You were never as alone as you believed. No signature, nothing else. The next morning, I visited the old building where my company had started. Most of the stores had changed. New owners, new signs. Only one business remained exactly the same. A tiny coffee shop on the corner. The owner looked up as I walked inside. Then he smiled. I wondered when you'd come back. I froze. You know me. He laughed softly. I've known you for years. I had never seen him before. Or at least, I didn't think I had. He placed a cup of coffee on the counter. You always ordered the same thing. Black coffee. No sugar. My stomach tightened. How could he know that? My name is Samuel, he said. I owned this place when your office was upstairs. Pieces slowly began fitting together. I used to watch you arrive every morning before sunrise and leave long after midnight. You reminded me of someone. Ooh, my daughter. His smile faded. I lost her many years ago. Silence settled between us. I saw something in you. Determination, kinness, hope. He reached beneath the counter, then placed an old notebook in front of me. You left this here one night. I opened it. It was mine. My first business notebook. Inside were handwritten goals. One day, I will build a company people can trust. One day, no one will ever control my future again. One day, my past will no longer define me. I couldn't remember leaving it behind. You came back looking for it, but I couldn't give it to you. Why? Because by then, you had already stopped writing dreams. You had started living them. Before I could ask another question, Samuel reached into a drawer. He removed an old envelope. Across the front was written Investor A17. My hands began shaking. You, he nodded. I invested through the Phoenix Trust. I stared at him in disbelief. But you didn't even know me. I knew enough. I knew you worked harder than anyone. I knew you paid your employees before yourself. I knew you never blamed the world for your pain. He smiled. Sometimes, character is a better investment than experience. Tears filled my eyes. Why stay anonymous? Samuel looked out the window. Because I didn't want you to succeed for me. I wanted you to succeed for yourself. As I stood to leave, Samuel handed me one final item. An old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Local businessman dies, saving family during fire." The man in the photo looked familiar. Very familiar. I looked closer. My heart nearly stopped. It was my father. But according to every story I'd ever been told, my father had died in a car accident. I slowly looked at Samuel. My father. He nodded quietly. You've been lied to. I felt the room begin to spin. Who lied to me? Samuel took a slow, painful breath. The answer to that question will change everything you believe about your family. Before I could speak, my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I answered, she was crying. Emma, you have to come home. It's about your father. The line suddenly went dead. I looked at Samuel. He already knew. The truth I had spent my entire life searching for was finally waiting for me. I don't remember the drive to my childhood home. Only the silence. The kind of silence that fills every corner of your mind when you know your life is about to change. My mother's phone had gone dead. She wouldn't answer when I called back. Again. And again. By the time I reached the house, an ambulance was parked outside. Neighbors stood in small groups, whispering. For one terrifying moment, I thought I was too late. I ran to the front door. A paramedic stopped me. Family. I nodded. My mother. He stepped aside. She's inside. I found my mother sitting on the living room floor. She wasn't injured. She was holding an old wooden box against her chest. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears. I'm sorry, Emma. Those were the first words she spoke. Not, how are you? Just, I'm sorry. I knelt beside her. What happened? She looked at the wooden box. I can't carry this secret anymore. My heart pounded. Is this about Dad? She slowly nodded. Then she handed me the box. Everything you need to know is inside. The box was old. Its corners were worn with age. Inside were dozens of letters. A faded wedding photograph, a silver watch, and one sealed envelope with my name written across the front. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably my father's. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means the truth has finally found you. First, you need to know one thing. I never abandoned you. Not for a single day. Everything you were told about my death was a lie. My vision blurred with tears. I looked at my mother. She couldn't meet my eyes. Tell me, I whispered. She took a long, painful breath. The newspaper Samuel showed you was real. Your father really did save a family from a fire, but he didn't die. I stared at her. What? He survived. The room spun. Then where was he? She closed her eyes. Richard Carter helped hide him. I stood up so quickly the chair behind me fell over. No? He told me Dad ruined my life. He manipulated my marriage. Why would he help my father? My mother finally looked at me. Because your father saved Richard's life that night. Everything stopped. She continued. Years before you met Daniel. Richard's factory caught fire. Your father ran inside to rescue people. He pulled Richard out moments before the building collapsed. But your father was badly injured. For months, he couldn't work. The medical bills buried us. Richard offered to help. We trusted him. She covered her face. That was our biggest mistake. Richard paid every bill, found doctors, even bought us a small house. He became part of our lives. Then one day, he came with another offer. He wanted your father to work for him. My mother wiped away another tear. But your father discovered financial fraud inside Richard's company. He refused to stay quiet. So Richard made him disappear. She nodded slowly. He offered your father a choice. Expose everything. Or let Richard quietly move him overseas under a new identity until the investigation ended. My father agreed. He believed it would only last a few months. Months became years. Then, shame kept him away. He believed I'd be happier thinking he was gone than knowing he had been forced to leave. I picked up the silver watch. It had stopped at exactly 8017. My mother smiled through her tears. That was the time you were born. Never stopped carrying it. I couldn't speak. Every birthday, every graduation, every Christmas, he had been alive, somewhere, thinking about me. There was one final item inside the box. A passport, not my father's, Richard Carter's. Tucked inside it was a handwritten address. No country, no explanation. Just an address. What is this? My mother looked surprised. I've never seen that before. Then my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. If you want the rest of the truth, come alone. Bring the passport. Don't tell Daniel. A location pin appeared beneath the message, an abandoned lakeside cabin. 30 miles outside the city. I looked at my mother. She grabbed my hand. Don't go. I stared at the phone. Whoever sent the message knew about the passport. They knew about Richard. And they knew. I had discovered the truth. I slipped the passport into my bag. I'm done running from secrets. As I walked toward the front door, another message appeared. This one contained only 6 words. Your father is waiting for you. My heart stopped. For years, I had searched for justice. Now, I was about to come face to face with the man I believed had died. But deep inside, a single question frightened me more than anything else. What if he no longer recognized the daughter he left behind? The road to the cabin stretched through miles of empty forest. No traffic, no houses, only silence. Every mile felt heavier than the last. I kept looking at the passenger seat where Richard's passport rested. Who had sent the messages? How did they know I had found it? And most importantly, was my father really waiting for me? An hour later, I reached the lake. The cabin stood alone near the water, old, weathered, almost forgotten. I stepped out of the car. The wind carried the smell of rain. For a moment, I couldn't move. If the message was true, everything was about to change. I slowly walked toward the front door. It was already open. Hello. No answer. The cabin was quiet. A fireplace burned softly in the corner. 2 cups of coffee sat on a wooden table. One of them was still warm. Someone had been here only moments earlier. Then, I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Careful. I turned around. An older man stood in the doorway. Gray hair. A walking cane. Deep scars across one side of his face. But his eyes. I knew those eyes. I had seen them every morning in my own mirror. Neither of us spoke. Tears filled his eyes first, then mine. He whispered one word. Emma. My legs gave out beneath me. He rushed forward as quickly as he could and caught me before I fell. For the first time in 20 years, my father held me in his arms. We cried without saying anything. No explanation could fit into that moment. No apology was big enough. No amount of lost time could ever be returned. Finally, he stepped back. I've imagined this day every single morning. His voice was older than I remembered, gentler. I never stopped looking for news about you. You graduated with honors. You started your own company. You survived. I looked at him in surprise. You knew. He smiled sadly. A father always finds a way. Though we sat beside the fireplace. For hours, he answered every question I had carried since childhood. No. He hadn't abandoned us. No. He had never started another family. No. He had never stopped loving me. I wrote hundreds of letters, he said. What happened to them? They never reached you. My heart sank. Who stopped them? He looked into the fire. Richard, I frowned. But why? He believed contact would expose where I was, so he kept every letter. Suddenly, I remembered the unopened letters inside my mother's wooden box. Richard hadn't destroyed them. He had hidden them, waiting for the day the truth could finally be told. My father reached into an old cabinet. He removed a faded leather journal. This belonged to Richard. I stared at him. He gave it to me 6 months ago. Why? He said. My father's voice trembled. If Emma ever forgives me, give her this. I carefully opened the journal. Most pages were filled with business notes. Then I reached the final chapter. The title read Lessons I Learned Too Late. The first line made me stop breathing. Power without love destroys everything it touches. The next pages weren't business records. They were confessions. Richard admitted every mistake, every lie, every manipulation, not to defend himself, but to warn whoever came after him. The final page contained only one sentence. If Emma is reading this, tell her she won. Tears rolled down my face. For years, I thought revenge meant making my enemies suffer. But standing there, holding the words of a broken old man, I finally understood. The greatest victory wasn't watching them lose. It was refusing to become like them. Just as I closed the journal, a loud knock echoed through the cabin. 3 sharp knocks. My father looked toward the window. His face turned pale. They found us. Woo! He didn't answer. Instead, he quietly stood, then reached beneath the floorboards. He pulled out a small metal lockbox. Take this. What is it? The evidence. Evidence against who? Before he could answer, the front door burst open. A man in a dark coat stepped inside. Behind him stood 2 more. The leader slowly removed his hat. I recognized him immediately. He wasn't a stranger. He had worked beside Richard Carter for over 25 years. Richard's former business partner. the man everyone believed had retired years ago. He smiled coldly. So, you finally found your father. My father stepped in front of me. You should leave. The man laughed. No. I've spent 20 years protecting one secret. His eyes locked onto the metal box in my hands. And I'm not about to let Emma expose it now. The room fell silent. Then he spoke the sentence that changed everything. Richard Carter was never the real villain. My heart stopped. What did you say? He smiled. Richard made terrible mistakes. But he wasn't the one who started this. He pointed directly at the lockbox. The real story is inside. Outside. The sound of approaching police sirens filled the night. Inside the cabin, everyone stood frozen. I looked down at the lockbox, then back at the man. After everything I had discovered, there was still one final truth waiting to be uncovered, and somehow, it was even bigger than revenge. Revenge reborn. The truth set me free. The police sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flashed through the cabin windows. No one moved. No one spoke. The man standing in front of us smiled, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. My father looked at me. Don't let fear make this decision. Then he looked at the metal lockbox in my hands. Open it. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the box. Inside, there were no stacks of money, no hidden fortune, no secret contracts, just a single folder, a recorder, and one sealed letter. Across the front someone had written, "For Emma, when you finally learn the truth." I broke the seal. The letter wasn't written by Richard. It was signed by another name, Michael Hayes. Richard Carter's former business partner. The same man standing only a few feet away. I began reading. Emma, if this letter has reached you, then my lies have finally caught up with me. Richard was never supposed to carry the blame alone. Years ago, I created a network of fake companies and illegal accounts. When your father discovered what I had done, Richard wanted to report everything. I refused. I threatened to destroy his company, his family, and everyone connected to him. Richard made the worst decision of his life. Instead of exposing me, he tried to protect everyone by keeping the secret. Every lie that followed was born from that one terrible choice. None of this excuses what Richard did, but the first betrayal was mine. My hand slowly lowered the letter. The cabin was completely silent. I looked at Michael. He wasn't smiling anymore. You let him take the blame, I whispered. Michael sighed. It was easier. For 20 years, I told myself I was protecting thousands of employees. But really, I was protecting myself. The police entered the cabin. Officers surrounded the room. No one resisted. Michael looked at me one last time. I've spent my entire life building an empire, and one lie destroyed all of it. He calmly held out his hands. The officers placed him under arrest. As they led him away, he stopped beside Richard's empty chair. I should have listened to him. Then he disappeared into the night. The cabin fell quiet again. Only my father and I remained. He looked exhausted. Years of carrying other people's secrets had finally come to an end. He smiled at me. Your mother always said you'd find the truth. I laughed softly through my tears. It took long enough. He nodded. Some truths arrive only when we're strong enough to survive them. For the first time, there were no more questions. No more missing pieces. Only tomorrow. 3 months later, the investigation was complete. Michael Hayes admitted everything. Every hidden account, every forged document, every threat. Richard Carter's name was cleared of crimes he never committed. But history didn't forget his mistakes. His manipulation, his control, his betrayal of my trust. Those were still real. Justice didn't erase the pain. It simply revealed the truth. Daniel visited me one final time. He looked healthier than before. Not because life had become easier. Because he had finally accepted responsibility. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I already gave that to you. I know. I came to thank you. I smiled. For what? For showing me the difference between success and character. We shook hands. Nothing more, nothing less. Then he walked away. This time, forever. Months later, I stood outside a brand new building. A simple silver sign hung above the entrance. Rue Bar and Malm, a place that offered free business training, legal guidance, and financial support for people rebuilding their lives after betrayal, fraud, or devastating loss. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I knew exactly how it felt to start over with nothing. Samuel became one of our first advisors. My father volunteered every week, mentoring young entrepreneurs. Even my mother found peace after years of living with guilt. Pain had brought us together. Healing kept us there. On the first anniversary of the foundation, a young woman approached me after one of my speeches. She looked nervous. I lost everything. I don't think I can start again. I recognized that look, because years ago, it had been my own. I smiled. You don't have to rebuild your old life. She looked confused. Why? Because sometimes, the life waiting for you is far better than the one you lost. As she wiped away a tear. How do you know? I looked at the crowd filling the foundation behind me. At my father laughing with volunteers. At my mother smiling without fear. At the people whose lives were beginning again. Then I answered, because I lived it. That evening, I visited the quiet hill where Richard Carter had been laid to rest. There were no cameras, no reporters, only silence. I placed a single white flower beside his headstone, not because he deserved to be remembered as a hero. He wasn't. Not because I had forgotten what he did. I never would. But because carrying anger any longer would only make me a prisoner of my past. I whispered softly, I hope you finally found the peace you spent your whole life searching for. Then I turned around and walked away, without looking back, because revenge had never been my ending. It had only been the beginning. I didn't win because the people who hurt me lost. I won because they no longer controlled my future. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving, I was lit in.